This video is sponsored by me. That's right. The weekend retreat is happening again this year from the 11th to the 13th of July. And you don't want to miss it because this year we're studying Ecclesiastes. That's right. The book that I haven't been able to stop talking about or thinking about for the last 5 years. We're putting aside a whole weekend to look at it. So email lambda.retreats@gmail.com if you're interested. It's from the 11th to the 13th of July. Whether you're a deeply committed Christian and you have been for years and you want a based environment to have those honest conversations, or maybe you're an atheist, but there's been some part of you been saying, I should give God a chance, or perhaps you're just feeling lonely and isolated in the modern world. Either way, email lambda.retreats@gmail.com and come and join us. As ever, I've invited some of the sharpest minds on the internet to compete in a competition of intellect, cunning, and taste. Welcome, Poe. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. Do you accept the challenge?
I take up the gauntlet. Let's see what you've got for me.
Well, as you can see, this year I've massively overcomplicated the format. And I should say, this beautiful artwork that you see here was done by you. You are the mysterious artist behind the.
Are you telling me this wasn't done by an AI image generator?
So I think we're still in the part of human history where people can tell that there was real, genuine human involvement.
Yeah.
How long that will last, I don't know.
What I tried to do with this map is to distinguish it from AI in particular by making it more detailed. The more further down you go, you can see more. What AI does is gives you a really good impression. On first viewing, you'll get the idea of what's in the image, but the closer you look, the less detail there is. Like the more the details don't really make sense. Whereas here, there's more detail.
Deliberately anti-AI piece of artwork.
Yeah.
Stamping humanity into the kind of fractal nature of it.
Well, we'll see in a few years how this compares to what the best of what AI can make.
Cool. So the idea here is that you want to get as much gold in your treasury by the end of the session as possible. And you do this by traveling out from Lambda's Landing, collecting gold into your pouch, and then returning to the treasury to deposit it. You'll encounter some monsters on the way. If you die, then the gold in your pouch is lost. So it only counts towards your score if you get back. But the further out you get to the edges of the island, the more lucrative it becomes. So it depends how daring you're feeling.
Oh.
So the first question, yes. Do they call that a win-more mechanic? Anyway, the first decision you have to make is you're at a crossroads. You've got 4 directions to go, and the directions determine the topics. So subsequent steps are further subdivisions of knowledge, as it were, right? So you could go to the Dunes of Dishonesty to talk about culture, the Biased Bridge to talk about society, the East Crossroads to talk about knowledge, or the Standing Stones to discuss ethics.
Oh, well, I like all of these. I think I'll try to go to all of them eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But let's go to the crossroads because I like that. I like that horse. I spent a lot of time drawing that horse.
Good a way as any to decide which way to go, I guess. So the crossroads is for topics about knowledge. Watch this. The guy's going to move. There he goes.
Oh, gosh.
But bad news. On the journey, you've encountered something dark, something devilish.
Oh, what?
The Elder One. I mean, what a first encounter. You'd think it would be a little pixie or something.
Yeah.
Your mind reels.
This makes no sense geographically from the position I'm in. It's clearly the coast.
I'll admit, I originally intended to put some logic in about where the monsters ended up, but I didn't have time. So you're
I'm
getting
not ready for
random
this.
encounters. Your mind
Okay.
reels as the impossible form takes shape, a grotesque amalgamation of tentacles and alien features that should not exist in the world. So some kind of eldritch horror, some kind of mind
Do I
melting.
get a choice, or do I have to fight? Do I have to fight the elder
You,
one now?
yes, you have no choice.
Okay.
But on the other hand, if you lose, you will go back to the
I've lost
starting
nothing.
point, and you haven't
Okay,
lost anything. So,
let's do it.
okay. So, so the question, the knowledge-related question, is: Can knowledge be harmful? Can knowledge be harmful? And the way this works is you give me your thoughts on this topic. We have like a little discussion. I'll score you on a secret scorecard with all kinds of secret ratings that will then give you stats. And then there is some dice rolling, and that determines whether or not you've won the encounter.
Good. I'll just get into it then, shall I?
Great. Yeah.
I think I think the first thing that comes to mind with this question is the truism that a little bit of knowledge can be a very bad thing. So, what I think ends up causing the most mischief and perhaps the sort of trouble that comes to mind when posing this question is when you let a little bit of knowledge slip into the wrong hands. Maybe people who don't have the context and the intelligence to fully understand the nuances of that knowledge,
Yep.
and end up getting the wrong end of the stick, or taking it too far, not fully understanding the opposing narrative, let's say. And I think in that context, yes, it can be harmful to have a small amount of knowledge about a subject, but then the remedy of that is not to stop that small amount of knowledge being disseminated or getting out into the public, but to enhance understanding with more knowledge. So it's a tricky situation where a little bit of knowledge is definitely can be bad, but if it leads to more knowledge, then it's good, and it can be remedied. So in summary, yes, it can be harmful, but certainly isn't always, or it's its own remedy to its own illness, I believe.
The little bit of knowledge can be a bad thing. Reminds me of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, yeah.
That it's often described with this graph, right, where it goes up, as in the x-axis is your actual level of knowledge, the vertical axis is your perceived level of knowledge. That there's kind of this initial spike where you feel like an expert, and then it goes back down, and slowly rises.
Yeah, I
And
think people overvalue the knowledge they have while undervaluing what they don't know, because they don't know that they don't know it. So they don't know the quantity of things they don't know yet. But sorry, continue. I interrupted you.
well, no, I was going to say the amusing thing about that graph is that it's actually an incorrect representation of the actual work of Dunning and Kruger. So everybody learns about the Dunning Kruger effect, a small amount, and then goes around proclaiming themselves experts on the Dunning Kruger effect.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true.
I think that I think that the more accurate graph is something like, so if you have knowledge and actual and expertise, a novice will overestimate their self-knowledge at low levels of expertise, and then the expert will be more humble at the top end. So anyway, I was thinking, can I pull up a graph here? But probably not without destroying the Gauntlet. So you'll all have to go and Google that.
I didn't know it was required, or I would have drawn one for you.
You should have included that in my requests. Can I have a
There is
line?
Yeah. So there is something. There's a nuance to the Dunning-Kruger effect that a lot of people miss, which is that people who, the master in a certain topic or in a certain skill, it still undervalues themselves a little bit, but they're still valuing themselves higher than the novice. And the novice isn't so self-deluded. They think they're better than the master, or they think they roughly, people do have some idea of their own knowledge. It's just that they do overvalue themselves at the lower end and undervalue themselves at the higher end. But those lines don't actually cross over. They are somewhat rooted in reality.
There must be some level of expertise at which you've exactly correctly estimated your. If a novice overestimates their ability and an expert underestimates their ability, there must have been necessarily some moment at which those lines crossed, at which your perception of your abilities was dead on. There was a split second in your life where you had a mathematically precise and accurate estimation of your abilities. So other than that quirk of potentially a little bit of knowledge giving you a false sense of confidence, because that sounds like an edge case, do you think in general knowledge is positive, that if you gain knowledge most of the time that's a benefit to you?
Yeah, I take that as one of the presuppositions of the question. That's taken as given. I think that knowledge is it's a word with positive connotations that we generally regard as good. Gaining knowledge is always good, I think.
Well, I agree that that's the general perception, but
I agree with that.
Actually, there's this really interesting verse in Ecclesiastes that says that with much knowledge comes much sorrow, and it's essentially saying the more you know, the more upset you will be, the more sadness comes along.
Ignorance is bliss. It's true.
Maybe that's the more common way we put it.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking of a more pragmatic view of the world, where I'm not so interested in people's moods about themselves and about their life, but about the knowledge of how to grow food is obviously advantageous if you are hungry and if you have some land.
Yeah.
Whether you benefit from knowledge or not, it's sort of independent of how that knowledge actually makes you feel. Whether it brings you sorrow, I think it's
he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. There you go. That's the King James version. In much wisdom is much grief. I guess as a child you're allowed the space to be ignorant, to be kind of blissfully ignorant, and as an adult you have the responsibility of having the knowledge. But I do think it's interesting that we have a perception of just gaining knowledge is good and we should gain as much as possible. And maybe that contributes to general unhappiness. We know more than we ought on far too many things.
Yeah, maybe that's due more to, I would say that's more, the devil is in the detail, in the sense that it's the focus of our learning that is the cause of strife, when you could be learning, how to, you could be acquiring a new skill that would help you in your life or that would help you get a new job. And yet a lot of people spend a lot of time learning about, how to make an anvil in Minecraft. Something I learned to do recently, just why it came apparently to my mind.
What's the recipe for an anvil?
Yeah. The
all right. I was going to say, I think you're ready for the battle. So.
Oh, brilliant! Let's see how we do.
The battle is happening. Oh,
Victory.
Good news!
I can't believe I did it.
You won. So let's go back to the map. See
What did
if
I
you
win?
encounter anyone else on your path. You got, what was it, 25 gold? Yeah, 25. Pretty
Good.
good. And now you're at the east crossroads. So
Okay.
from here, you could go back and immediately bank your 25 gold, or you could continue to the Superstition Swamp or the Chicanery Shack, way up in the
It's
northeast.
yeah, it's quite a long road, which is why I drew the horse, as if you're picking up the horse to take the long road to the
Nice.
chicken shack.
Oh,
Just so you know,
that's
I also
great.
drew a little chest at Lambda's Landing. That's where, when you described the rules of the game,
Yeah,
um, a few weeks
it's
ago,
perfect.
I drew a little treasure chest. I imagine that's where you're depositing your goods. Yeah, I think I'll go back to Lambda's Landing, because I do have gold and because I wanted to explore some of those other avenues.
Sure. Okay, let's send you scurrying homewards and bank the gold. There you go. The 25 is now safe. No one can take that away from you. And you've got the options to go to the Dunes of Dishonesty, the Biased Bridge, or the Standing Stones.
I'm interested in the difference between culture and society, but because I'm broadly interested in both of these things, I know that they're not the same. I just wonder how you distinguish them.
How I've split them
Um,
up.
Unless culture, you mean culture in the sense that you're going to ask me a question about movies, and society, I guess, would be more of a question about societal, cultural norms, you might say.
Well, I could. I'll tell you what. Since
Let's
I've
just find out. We'll do a question and then
okay,
let's be a little bit spontaneous.
I was going to say, since
Either
I
is
haven't
fine.
used this feature yet, I've actually got this tree that you can click in and see all of the subtopics.
Yeah. Oh,
So
that's good. So we can see what follows on from it.
yeah, there you go. I mean, this is more information than we can reasonably go through
Yeah.
on
Okay. So
stream at
what's
this
in?
moment.
Yeah. No, let's find out as we play. I think.
Okay, fine. So sorry, you said you wanted to go to the Dunes of
Yeah.
Dishonest.
Dunes.
No,
Yeah. Let's go there
yeah,
to the dunes.
to the Dunes. Okay.
I'm excited to see whether whether the knight will follow the path or whether he'll just take a straight line. Oh,
It's a straight line is the answer,
I see. Yeah.
but because he's quite big, it sort of doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. Okay.
It's as this reminds me of the Civilization series where you have a fairly realistic landscape, and then the characters you're looking at are all oversized. Oh,
Yeah.
bad news! As you were on the path to the Dunes of Dishonesty, you've had another encounter with a weaver. Silk strands glisten in the light as 8 legs emerge from shadows. The Spider Woman's eyes. I mean, it's more spider than woman at this point.
Who am I to assume it's gender?
That's true. Focus on you with predatory intent.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's. So the spider presents you with this question: should art be judged by its aesthetic or moral qualities?
I went to an interesting talk last night by I guess he was a academic of drama or of art, and he was talking about how academic institutions have been, as we all know, have been taken over by the moralists, the camp that he says that it's impossible to get any research funded into anything that does not support sustainability or gender
Huh.
politics.
Yeah.
He says that very much that this is more about the study of art, of course, but I think there has been a push recently to make art moral, certainly in universities. I think in the mainstream, there's been a backlash against overly moralizing, preachy art. Let's say, thinking more of sort of movies and TV, and the existing. Somehow, the people who have survived Hollywood without being overly preachy or moralistic have excelled in their ability to make stuff that is, engaging and humorous and yes, aesthetic as well. I watched a film recently by Robert Eggers, who's one of my he's a hot director at the moment. That was Nosferatu and
The Lighthouse.
Northman, yeah, the Witch, very good films by a very good director, and he's about the least moralistic storyteller you could imagine, and one of the more aesthetic directors working at the time. But that is all to say that yes, certainly I believe that aesthetics are the most important thing in art, and by extension, other forms of art that are more sort of story based and character based. I extend that to having characters who are interesting, characters who are who have sort of funny or witty dialogue, or who have inspiring or interesting dialogue, and character moments that really make a narrative piece of artwork. But in artwork, there's certainly aesthetics is king, and moral qualities are perhaps more of a fad, I think, even though we think of the aesthetics as being quite shallow and trendy and changing with our ever-changing trends. It's actually the morality of our culture that is shifting quite rapidly at the moment, and the aesthetics seem to be a sort of afterthought of anything. The making things that are intentionally ugly and uncomfortable to witness seems to be the one prevailing school of thought that I think is probably being snuffed out.
If I get the impression that the artist's primary intention is to convey a moral message, my brain almost recategorizes it as no longer being art at all. So it's like it's
propaganda.
There's always this question of what is art. Can a bundle of sticks on the ground be art? And I probably generally fall into the school of thought that if there is somebody who considers themselves to be an artist and they've presented this thing to you as artwork, then it is art definitionally. It might not be very good art. That's a different question. But if somebody says, this is art, I've made this thing and it's art, then it is. But if somebody says, I've made this thing and its intention is to propagandize, to convince, to persuade, to change the world, sort of an activist mentality, I don't think they're presenting me with art at that point. That leaves the realm of being artwork in my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. Although I think that there is, I think for something to be art, it does need to have intention, which is why I would say, some randomly thrown sticks down onto the ground can't be art, but then a still life painting of those sticks could be. Maybe not art, but it would be a study for the artist. I don't know how widely known it is, like the difference between an artist working in their studio. They might produce 10 studies in a day, and it might take them weeks to make art, even if to the untrained eye the studies look in equal quality to the art. I think many artists distinguish this by the study is what you use to improve your method, improve your technique. And I was quite when I was first setting out as an illustrator, just in my teenage years, sort of drawing pictures for Tumblr or whatever. I thought I was creating art, but really I was just practicing drawing and then uploading pictures of it.
I want to push a little bit more on this bundle of sticks on the ground question, because if somebody genuinely spent years of their life traveling the world, finding just the perfect set of sticks. They traveled through the Amazon, and then they came back and they positioned the sticks on the floor just so. They moved them. 10 degrees this way, 2 centimeters to the left. And in their mind, although they never communicated this to anyone, they had deep meaning for each of the sticks. They said this stick represents Western civilization, and this stick represents love, and the way that
this one is my
the way they
ex-girlfriend.
connect. Yeah, that one that's smashed to pieces in the corner. Now, if you came across the bundle of sticks at a glance, you'd not see anything different than the hypothetical bundle of sticks that somebody else had just picked up in the parking, dropped on the floor. And to a casual observer, maybe, well, the observer in this case, let's not mind whether or not they could theoretically study it more and notice a difference. At the moment that you look at the bundle of sticks that has been carefully arranged, it appears to be indistinguishable. So do you think that the more labor intensive piece is genuine artwork, and is it the work that went into it that elevates it?
Yeah, I think in this scenario that you've made, I think it was sort of interesting that our last topic was about knowledge, and I feel like you've asked kind of an epistemological question there. Like, if you don't know that it's art when you're looking at it, is it art? So I think to the artist who is intending to create art and who has created this, even if they're never told anyone, I think for them it's art. They're observing it, and then if they told their friend, "Hey, come look at this piece that I made," and the friend goes, "Oh, this is really nice. Like, are you going to take a picture of it? Are you going to paint it?" No, I'm not going to. This is an exhibition piece, and there's going to be no one invited to this exhibition. So I think, if you knew that it was art when you're looking at it, that would make it art. Let's just say for you. The fact that that people could look at it without realizing that it was art, I think, doesn't. It's a difference of perspective, and I think we could go into sort of quite a postmodern avenue of how do we know anything? Does our perception of things make it so, or there is reality, and to I guess the Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen answer would be that there's no difference in this. The atoms that make up the Sistine Chapel roof are the same, more or less, as the atoms that make up any other roof. And there's no art to be found, within the fundamental particles of the of it, and it only exists in the perception of, the perception of it. And if one day the Sistine Chapel is going to be, dust on the ground, and no one looking at that dust, if there is anyone to look at it, would know that there was once an amazing artwork here. So it is very much a point of perspective to whether something is art or not. But I feel like we have diverged quite broadly from the topic.
That's true. But let's do the battle.
Good.
You won't believe the simulations running in the background here to decide whether you've won. It's Oh,
you mean the battle with the spider, not the simulation?
The battle with the spider. Yeah, there's the spider is fully simulated in 3 dimensions, and it's some real cutting edge battle tech. But good news, you've won the battle.
Oh, I've done it again.
Let's bring you back to the map. And
I managed to make it this far without bragging about my excellent score on the last Gauntlet. By the way, anyone who hasn't seen that, you have to go and see
if you've been enjoying this year's Gauntlet, do consider going back and rewatching last year's, and why not start with Poe's episode from last year. All right, you're at the Dunes of Dishonesty. Let's bring up your actions. You can head back to Lambda's Landing to bank your gold, or you could continue to Benevolence Bay, which is on the subject of expression, or the West Crossroads, the topic of storytelling.
Oh, I love storytelling. I can't pass it up. Even if it leads to my death, I will. I would like to see what question you have on storytelling.
All right, let's do it. Okay, here you go. You're traveling towards the West Crossroads, but shock and horror. Who should you encounter on the way but a woodland galloper? A centaur rears up before you, spear glinting in the dappled light, his wild eyes, assessing your worth as enemy or ally.
Yeah, I didn't get these descriptions when I drew the when I drew the picture. By the way,
There are a
I,
few. There's sort of 3 or 4 different name and description pairs for each of the drawings. So this
oh,
the same
interesting.
drawing can show up as a slightly different creature.
You have to watch the whole series to see the context of all these pictures. But
Yeah,
yeah,
collect them all.
yeah. When you asked me to draw a centaur, I didn't know if he was going to be an ally or
Good
he'd
guy.
be like a riddler or if he's attacking you. But yeah, let's face him. Whether it's a battle of wits or a battle of swords, let's go to the fight.
Okay, so the question is, can fiction teach more effectively than fact?
Well, that is interesting. Yeah, I think that's almost certainly true. Although it obviously depends on the context. But teaching by analogy is very powerful and pretty much ubiquitous. That there was I made a video about it at the time, but there was a conversation on a podcast I listened to. It was Scott Adams, the artist of Dilbert, and
Oh, yeah, fellow cartoonist.
yeah, cartoonist, yeah, Dilbert, fellow
A
based
colleague.
cartoonist. It was a synchronized sip, yeah.
Yeah.
And Sam Harris, famous atheist intellectual, and
Yes.
Sam Harris was using an analogy not for the first time in the conversation, and Scott Adams just stopped him. He was like, "Can we have the rest of this conversation without you using an analogy?" And it's like it kind of felt like it was a funny moment because it was anyone who knows Sam Harris is like, well, you're asking him to like speak without using his
Stop
lips.
speaking. Yeah.
But it is there's a reason people use analogies, and it can be used deceptively, but it is extremely useful for conveying information. When I'm teaching, I've taken on teaching jobs recently, and I always go to describing, using analogies to describe, particles, waves, electricity. These are things that we have no perception of. And so in order to describe the behavior of electrons in a circuit, you must use some analogy, whether it's cars on a road or thinking of it as like tennis balls or thinking of potential difference as like a difference in height. And there's like a ball rolling down a hill going up little, all kinds of fictions that I come up with to convey the behavior of something so that you can better understand a subject without even, by using this proxy, you've better described a thing. You've understood something better, even though actually the conception that you have of it isn't quite accurate, and it's probably a little bit worse to imagine it as a tennis ball. It doesn't look anything like a tennis ball, an electron, but it does help, and it conveys. It does teach very effectively.
I think we have the impression that most of our speech is straightforward and literal, and occasionally we dip into fancy analogies to communicate. But actually, almost everything that we say is, if you actually break down people's sentences, almost everything they're communicating is done through these kinds of pictures and images. I mean, even in the sentence I just said, I used the phrase dip into and break down for quite abstract ideas.
Or if you say we're going to look at, or we're going to, what you really mean is call to mind a person thinking, or you go, let's look at someone talking.
Yes,
you don't want to look at them,
but then call to mind is also there's literally barely any language. So call is about shouting out. You could talk about time flying by as if it's in the air and has wings, or you could say it was crawling, or you know, but it's actually more the case that fiction is everything that we know, and all we have is layers of fiction. It's sounding quite Petersonian that all we really have is communication that's effective, and there's no such thing as fact.
I'll give you I don't know if I get points for making random trivia, but one of my favorite.
Oh yes, I have a random trivia counter, so I'll increment that.
One of my favorite sort of etymology facts is that the term stubble, like on your face, or the thing that you've got a bit longer than stubble today.
Yeah.
But stubble, the word stubble can also refer to a field that's been harvested, and all that's left is the sort of dry stalks that stick out of the field. So I'll ask you, what do you think came first, the stubble on the face or the stubble on the field?
Well, now I'm feeling like, are you bluffing me or double bluffing me?
I did almost say it, so.
I'm gonna go for the field was first, and we name the short beard hair because it looks like a field.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, it's one of those things that we're using imagery without even knowing it.
I wouldn't have thought it that way around until you asked me the question. So,
well, that's why I thought it was the interesting fact, is because it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's a good fact
of what I assumed. Yeah, I think the question also more broadly asks, or I should say more particularly, might be asking about teaching moral lessons through fiction, in the sense that we're actually talking about stories and storytelling, that we act out morality and these character studies that are, in the Petersonian sense, they're far more complex than what we could write out in lessons like be good and protect the helpless, defeat evil. All these things that we can say with basic words. We can say so much more with a good nuanced story. And when I last saw you, we talked about the film Heretic. That I think is a good example of that. But the characters in that film have an intellectual argument that is not really resolved. You have there's no party that conclusively wins the argument, but by watching the film and seeing how these people behave according to their own ethical principles, you can see which of them wins the encounter, and they are fighting for their own relative perspectives, and so it's sort of acted out in real action.
The other thing this brings to mind is that an anecdote is often more powerful than a statistic. Wasn't it Stalin who said, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic?
Yep.
I think that's such an interesting observation, because it's one you can kind of verify with yourself. You can think about one person's death and you're struck by the tragedy of it. Feels really horrible to think about somebody who was alive and then died. If you think about 1 million people dying, maybe it's bad that I am so similar to Stalin in this regard, but it just makes very little difference to me until I have to boil it down to thinking about one of them being a person who died, and then kind of doing the intellectual maths and going, well, I guess that's 1 million times that. But it's not that 1 million times 1 million people dying, it feels less than 1 million times worse than one person dying. It literally feels like less of a tragedy than one person's death. And hence why, if you want to persuade somebody about something, the fact is, here's the numbers, here's the stats, we can prove this exists. But the thing that really speaks to people, that they will actually process and act on and care about, is if you can just give one example of one person who, unless you also have the stats to back it up, this could be a completely misleading. But if you can find a compelling example, you can then act rationally because you've aligned the way you feel to truth. But I think this is why it's so dangerous that people can. It's like adolescence, right?
I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, the effect that it's had on the country is as if this was a representative instance of a broad statistic. People are kind of acting as though, well, we've encountered this one tragic story of a boy who killed a girl in school, but we kind of assume that because we're being told about this, that it is in place of a broad trend that
it's representative.
That is representative. Yeah, a bit like the map having the giant knight walking around on it. We sort of imagine that the things that we encounter are these comically oversized, low quality representations of more complicated trends, whether or not that's actually true.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true that the single example can it could be that there are thousands of examples that would counteract or outweigh that one, but if you're only presenting that one, it's the man bites dog phenomenon of representation in media. It's very powerful, and I think that's it's a shame, but it's also, I guess, it's inevitable that when you're presenting the story to prove a point, kind of coming back to our conversation earlier about creating art, that you're obviously going to want to back up your story with the most effective means possible. And if you have any training in rhetoric or storytelling, you'll know that you need to. It's much more effective to have lots of attention on one case than to present it as a statistic, which is exactly what you just said.
Good. Well, let's see if you've defeated the woodland galloper, who doesn't look very threatening. It looks more like you're having a casual chat with him, really, which is
good.
Probably more accurate. Good. You've won, and you've gained 40 gold from that encounter. So you've now got 60.
Wow. Okay, so now I've got a better idea now of how it seems
scales.
To add up. Yeah, yes. This is the first of my ventures out that I've gone this far. So it seems like the I've also got a better idea of how difficult these encounters are. Now I'm feeling overconfident. So
you're going to keep going?
Let's keep going. Let's see what are the options we have if they seem interesting.
So
you
can head back, or you can go on to Charisma Chasm, which is about tradition, Tautology Tower, which is about film, and then there's also an item at the location, so you could open the tome.
Wait, so I can open that now, or I can do that after I get to the location? Oh, yeah, I'm
no,
open the tome.
You have to do it now because it's at the West Crossroads, and once you head out on the journey, then you'll have left it behind.
Okay. Well, I hope this isn't one of those cursed tomes.
Oh, that's the decision you've made.
I'm not going to read aloud from it. I'm just going to look at it.
Okay. The image hasn't come up properly, but it says, a book that analyzes the structure of stories. It seems to predict how events will unfold.
That's good.
Yeah, so let's stick that in your inventory for now. That could come in useful at some point.
Yeah. It's a shame you can't see the picture because it's one of my better illustrations of Tome.
I know. I don't know what's happened. Well, I don't have time to fix it right now.
That's all right. Imagine a really good, the best picture of a tome you've ever seen.
Yeah. I wonder how many people are just listening to this and aren't even watching all the efforts the two of us have made to make this a visual spectacle. Is that too strong?
Only my effort. Your effort to make it an immersive storytelling experience is
Oh yeah,
it harkens back to like a text-based adventure.
That's right.
So you can go north, east, south, or
Yeah. Okay, so you've obtained the tome, which should give you some sort of stat boosts in future battles. So.
Okay, so the options for topics are film or tradition.
Yes.
Both of which I like. I think I did a really good job on those two pictures. Just to give myself more of a pat on the back.
They're all great.
I equally, based on the quality of the illustration, I want to go to both equally.
Well, I tell you what, you can go up to one and then back down to the other if you like.
Oh, I forgot that was an option. Yeah. So do I have to face the same or a different foe on the way back? Because it hasn't got a topic on the way back to the Dunes of Dishonesty.
Yeah, so I think that the paths are kind of like diodes, right? So you only face the beasts going outwards from Landers Landing.
The outward journey.
Yeah.
And yet, according to storytelling, the backwards journey is often
wow.
Perhaps not equally rife, but is frequently incorporated into the story of the journey.
I hadn't considered the hero's journey aspect of this, that whenever you go back to Lambda's Landing you might be changed beyond
forever changed
recognition. Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to the charisma chasm, because it would be a shame if none of your guests ever went there. I don't know what your where they've been going, but I'd like to have that illustration on the screen for a bit longer, and I am interested in tradition.
Good. Okay, I'll adjust the position of the screen so you can see that epic drawing a bit more. It's a sinkhole, I guess. Is that the inspiration that sometimes, I don't know how this happens, but you sometimes see videos of like someone merrily driving along, and then in front of them a 50-foot circular, perfectly kind of carved hole appears, and stuff just falls into it. Which feels like a thing that should be from myths and legends, but it does actually happen.
The void is the void under the earth that is unstable but can lay dormant for a while until a crack forms, and then things can then fall into the void. So the hole was always there, but it was it's just a more complicated sort of pitfall where there's things on top, but if things shift underneath, then the void. Then we haven't created space out of nothing. There's no portal like transporting it to a different place. It's just a big hole underground that's now being filled with whatever falls into it.
Well, it feels fitting that out of the hole should come the deep dweller. Your mind reels as the impossible form takes shape, a grotesque amalgam of tentacles and alien features that should not exist in this world. I think it was Distributist was asking whether these were wings on this drawing.
Yeah.
So can you confirm? Yes, that's what I.
No,
I said
the reference material that I studied had wings, so I thought it made it look less like a naked man with a squid on his head if he had wings.
I wonder if that's why the wings were added by the kind of previous artists in the lineage. Okay. So you're heading towards Charisma Chasm, which means you will be getting tradition-related questions. Okay. The question from the Deep Dweller is, are traditions primarily symbolic or practical?
Well, that's interesting. I think that I'm stealing a principle from someone else who I can't remember the name of or the exact words of, but the traditions are the practical wisdom that we've forgotten the reasons for. So they become symbolic because we don't understand the practical use for them. And sometimes they do. The practical use of tradition does become out. It's not needed anymore. But to assume that it's not needed anymore is foolish, which is the coined the term of Chesterton's fence, that that you must keep the tradition until you've determined what the original use for the tradition was. It's a principle that I stand by. Although I also think that it's similar to the conversation we had about the Dunning-Kruger effect earlier. I think people wrongly suppose that they understand the purpose of a tradition and quite merrily do away with it without properly reconciling the fact that perhaps our ancestors and ancient peoples, or more recent ancestors, actually were more similar to us than we like to suppose, and the struggles that were faced by previous traditions are still being faced by us today. Just because we have smartphones and indoor plumbing, psychologically we're not that different, and a lot of traditions are based around human psychology, I think.
I could imagine Mary Kondo, the kind of decluttering celeb. You can imagine a grumpy Chesterton TV show where he's insisting that you keep all your clutter because you don't know the significance or importance of it.
Yeah. Good point.
So one of my previous guests mentioned that they thought I can't remember the example. I think it was something from Genesis, but that's it, snakes. So apparently poisoned. There's some way in which you can use apples as an sort of anti-poison, anti-venom. So the idea that Genesis is, so I guess you could do one of those memes with the increasing levels of intellect, where the top level is it was a real snake and a real person, and the middle level of it's all kind of symbolic, and then the most enlightened version of it is it was actually a very practical thing about watching out for snakes and how to cure yourself from the and these kind of mythological stories about the origin of things are often described as just so stories. So you've got to explain why everybody speaks different languages, so you come up with this just so story about the Tower of Babel, and God caused everyone to speak different languages so they couldn't cooperate and threaten him. And I kind of feel like the modern world is doing just so stories for the just so stories. So you've got an origin story for the Garden of Eden where you've come up with a mythological origin of, like, the question is, why do we have this story about the origin of the world? And the answer is, well, once upon a time there was a snake and there was an apple. And the apple was an antidote, and that's why we tell the story about the Garden of Eden. We've just done kind of mythological stories squared, but our extra layer has this sheen of scientism on top.
Yeah, I think we've talked about Jordan Peterson's approach to dissecting the Bible before, and he obviously spent, one of his most famous series on YouTube is doing his Genesis series, talking about human evolution, and the what makes humans different from animals is our knowledge of the future and our ability to plan for the future. It in some ways imposes suffering on us because we're constantly anxious and having to fight each other for resources and needing to sort of build houses, and now we have jobs and computers and emails, and it's all very detached. It's all very abstract compared to the actual survival mechanism that we're that our ancestors had to deal with. I guess to come back to our question of traditions, though, I think stories are definitely a kind of tradition, and I think the most well-known stories are the ones that we have associated with a particular tradition. It's interesting that stories like the traditions like Easter and Christmas are very very firmly rooted. Like it's not legendary. Like we know this is rooted in a religious practice that has an associated story, and it's an event that we're celebrating on these days, and yet we are fully capable of celebrating those things without ever evoking the imagery of the original story. So I was just watching a video today about analyzing Christmas Christmas adverts and noting that there's no Christian imagery in hundreds of adverts that were analyzed these days, because it's taken on a new meaning. But I guess that the question then would become: is Christmas a tradition, or was it a tradition until we started to mess with it, and now it only vaguely resembles the tradition, the original tradition itself?
One of my favorite jokes on this, there's a channel called Oral Noughts who do kind of, they put fake audio over clips from Star Wars to kind of turn it into a new story. So they turn the Battle of Hoth into a Life Day parade. The Empire are throwing this parade for the people living on Hoth. And the Emperor gets in touch with Darth Vader to say he's upset because why is it a Life Day parade? Why isn't it called Christmas anymore? Nobody says Christmas. But I guess in the Star Wars galaxy, Christmas is not connected to Christianity. So he says, I'm putting the Chris back into Christmas. Just like that. In this hypothetical Star Wars universe, then the two components of the word Christmas are Chris and then Tmas. Yeah. Good. All right. Let's. Are you ready to see whether you've triumphed over the deep dweller?
Yeah, I've thought it in before, so. Oh, good.
Well, this is actually just a similar looking, but technically a different creature. Yeah.
Wait, did it have a different name before as well?
I think. Did it not? Maybe it was. Maybe it was literally the same. Look, your narratologist's tome helped.
Oh, good.
The image still didn't show up, but let's ignore that. And good news, you got 90 gold pieces. So
wow.
There's now 150 sitting in your pouch. You're at risk of being mugged. Do you want to take the risk of going across to the Tautology Tower, or do you want to go back and bank your gold?
No, I think we should go back. I don't want to
keep it secret.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're not going to get rolled because I didn't draw any ruffians, or did I? Now that I think about it, I did draw some humanoids. So
Okay, let's travel back all the way back to the landing. Here we are, and bank your gold. So you now have an incredible 175 in the treasury. And do you have time to do one? Maybe you can just do one more journey.
What about pick up the compass? Is that an option?
Sure. Good spot.
Trying to hide this from me. You don't want me to get my items.
Well, it's partly the fact that the item system is slightly broken at the moment, as you can see by the images not showing up.
Did I draw a compass? I can't remember.
Yeah. But nobody's ever going to see it at the moment. I'm hoping to fix it before the next guest. So we'll see.
Okay.
So I'll stick that in your inventory.
Points towards knowledge, enhances your navigational abilities.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay. So do you want to just try a third direction out from Lambda's Landing?
Yeah, one we haven't been down before. So we went down culture last time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's try ethics.
All right, towards the Standing Stones. Do you reckon you'll encounter anything on the route?
Oh no, not at all. There's no way.
Uh-oh.
And now we're caught in suspense. Oh,
A lindworm.
For a second there, I thought there was the deep dwellers back.
And now that I look at the drawing, the description doesn't actually match that well. But never mind.
Okay.
I'll change let me voice over a different description.
Don't worry about it.
The ground rumbles, and out of the dirt is a worm the size of a truck. Right, that'll do.
Perfect.
So, an ethics-related question. Is moral progress possible? We hear a lot about progressivism, the arc of history, and we tend to push back against this idea. So then, are we just stuck with nothing but regression?
I am a bit of a believer in moral progress, but not for it's not arbitrarily. The people didn't just one day decide to be good because someone had the idea that we should stop being bad. I think that the changing circumstances of human life have allowed us to extend morality more than just self-preservation. We're now able to be more generous, more thoughtful about other people, which is. But then again, that is just my perspective, being a modern person with modern morals. Mm-hmm. It's more or less inevitable that I would think that other moral paradigms were less moral than mine, because that's the nature of morality, is that my morality is good, or my culture's morality. If I did everything that my conscience told me to, I'd be a good person. Let's just say that. And that other people in history and other different societies that have different morality, they I quite magnanimously give them the excuse of not being as lucky as I am to be born into a moral society. They don't have the advantages that I have.
I do think there's something to that if somebody is following their own conscience, that's praiseworthy, even if my conscience disagrees with theirs. If I think they genuinely are doing what they think is right, I do credit them with, in a way, if somebody did the same thing as me, but I knew that it was against their conscience, then I wouldn't think that was praiseworthy.
I think in general that's correct, but then I also, you can look at suicide, like a
serial killer,
or serial killers. I don't know. The serial killers have been so much dramatized by fiction that I don't really know what goes into the psychology of a serial killer.
No. What about Ted Kaczynski?
Yeah, no, he was definitely doing something, wasn't he?
But he unlike a lot of other serial killers who are just doing stuff for their own pleasure, he supposedly had some logic about this is for the purpose of mankind going down a better path.
Well, exactly. That's the insurgent sort of terrorist mindset, is that there is an ideology behind it that's almost more dangerous than the senseless killing of someone who merely is mentally ill and wishes to hurt others for their own enjoyment.
But at the same time, there's also an external sense in which I approve or disapprove of somebody's actions, regardless of their internal monologue. It's like, oh, you killed somebody, so you're guilty of murder. I don't care if you're mad or deranged or whatever excuse you want to give me. It's really straightforward. You did the act. The act is wrong. Therefore, you're culpable.
Yeah, it's I think the consequences of immoral actions, in modern times, within a society, one of the facets that defines a society is having some sort of justice system. And we can say that it was more primitive in the past because they didn't have prisons, they would just sort of chop off people's limbs or kill them, and it often in very brutal ways. But it's almost not even a society if there's no consequences for being immoral, for being caught breaking the law, as it were. I'm not a historian, but I believe that's one of the, having a currency and having a written language and having a justice system. Maybe that third one isn't quite as hard a rule, but it's almost a different question. Like, what should the punishment for a crime be for being immoral? And there are many immoral things that we don't punish, which is also a very interesting question. I think it's not illegal to cheat on your spouse. It's not illegal to emotionally manipulate your spouse, or to financial abuse is, I think, grounds for divorce, but not actually illegal. Many of these things, it's some of the worst things that we do to other people. My point is that they're not actually.
It's interesting.
Illegal.
So, one perspective is that things should be illegal if they are immoral and bad enough to bother. So we're like, we don't get the legal system involved for trivial matters, but for serious matters that morality and the legal system should align. There's been times, I think it was the case in Britain previously, that infidelity was illegal. Am I wrong about that? Did we decriminalize adultery at some point?
Perhaps. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that, actually. I have to research it.
I'm gonna Google it
I don't
right
think
now.
I'm aware of that, but okay. Yeah, I think.
Oh yes, so the introduction of the Matrimonial Causes Act in 1857 made adultery, decriminalised adultery.
Oh, there you go.
I wonder who was arguing for that.
Yeah,
Somebody who was currently on trial.
Yeah, well, it would have been easier to argue in a society where there's no divorce, probably, that if marriage was something that was binding for as long as the two people lived, then you might want to be less. You might want to go a bit easier on people who, renounce their marital vows.
Well, we now have no fault divorce, don't we? So you can get a divorce for any reason. So I guess in your own mind, you could make adultery the cause of the divorce, and the law is like, oh, we don't care. It could be because the person has an annoying laugh.
You could effectively sue them. I think you're right that a lot of the time people just won't bother because they know that the legal processes are so arduous. But if there is something to gain from your spouse in the divorce, and they have and they are an adulterer, then it might be worth your time to bring it all out into court.
Something that I've noticed more and more, as in, I don't think the world is changing, but my noticing of it is, is that people really do decide whether something is right or wrong based on the law. So when the law changes, they'll have a brief moment of dissonance where they go, I don't agree with the new law. And then if you ask them again about it a year later, they'll suddenly have changed their views and decided that actually this thing that's become illegal or become legal they've actually always felt that that was the right way for things to be.
Yeah, if they don't think that it's fine, whatever this immoral action is, if they don't think it's fine, then at least they'll have moved in that direction, compared to it's not fine and it should be illegal, to it's not fine, but I guess people can do what they want. And then maybe eventually they'll be like, oh, my own son or daughter is engaging in this thing that is not illegal. So I suppose in order to maintain that relationship with my family members, I'm going to convince myself that it's fine.
Yeah, it's like if a celebrity if somebody is wanting to accuse somebody of being a bad person, it's a more it's like a final argument if you can say that they are a convicted felon or they've were found guilty in a court of law of such and such crime.
It's an appeal to authority.
Yes,
If it backs up your opinion, then you can use that. And if it doesn't back up your opinion, you can just ignore it.
Yeah, and the word alleged is kind of, I guess, it has the effect in people's minds of, oh, this person, that what they did maybe is fine, even if there's overwhelming evidence that they did the thing and it just hasn't happened to be proven in a court of law. I find that very interesting. It's like a genuine outsourcing of thinking, where you say, on principle, I'm always going to agree with the verdict of the legal system. Like I just absolutely trust that we have justice.
I think I do have a maybe slightly controversial opinion about that, which is that if you're going to question the verdict in a legal case, you have to put as much effort into researching that case and you have to find out literally every single thing that came up in the courtroom, so that you can see everything that the jurors and the judge saw, in order for you to think that your opinion of that case is better than the opinion that the jurors came to.
You're sounding exactly like Sam Harris. Oh no, Douglas Murray, isn't it? It's the Dave Smith debate. Did you see that on Rogan?
Oh, yes, I did.
Unless you've been to Israel, you can't have an opinion on the conflict.
Look, how dare you smear me? No, we're going to have to talk about that another time, because
that's a whole stream in itself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I reckon we see whether you've defeated the sandworm.
The worm. I do have one more thing to say about moral progress, and I think looking at human behavior from an objective standpoint, I think morality is so subjective that I don't think the word progress even really applies. It's only my opinion from this standpoint that I can say that some morality is worse or better than someone else's. I think it's so subjective that a Roman centurion would think that we were very degenerate in our society. Well, that's true as well. But they, I think I think that I don't think moral progress is possible. I think it's
wow.
I think it's sort of a contradiction in terms almost.
All right.
I hope I haven't lost points on that, but I thought it was worth it.
Take on the Lindworm.
I've been facing very strong enemies. I don't know if I've just got a bad draw, but
sad times.
Above 80.
You've
above
been defeated.
Oh no!
But you didn't lose anything.
I didn't have any gold,
so it actually doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that brings your session on Gauntlet Island to an end. Thank you so much for joining me and playing, and also thank you so much for all of your amazing artwork that everyone has been so charmed by. And I should say, people can contact you on Twitter if they want. Is that right? If they were wanting you to draw something for them, you're open to
commissions.
What's the word? Yes, commissions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm open to commissions. You can direct message me on Twitter or on Instagram or by email. That's just potheperson at gmail.com. I really enjoyed making this map and the you wanted such a variety of assets, the enemies and items and such, that I didn't really give any one of them probably the attention that it deserved. But I really did enjoy creating the world.
It's great. It's added a lot, and I think people have seen the wide variety of things that you've drawn for it, so they're getting I think it's worked really well to have, because I did give you a list of like zillions of things to draw, and it was like, don't try and do the whole list, but the more things the better, and you did a great job.
Yeah.
So
well, thanks very much. No, it's been a pleasure. And to play the game as well. I hope that 175 is a good score.
It's a very good score.
We'll see.
When I figure out
who wins the ultimate champion of the Gauntlet.
Should I have a look? Because I haven't yet made a leaderboard screen. But I can see all the people. I'll tell you what, just as a one-off, I will show you the back end. Nobody else has seen this yet, but
So how do you do it? Is it a certain number of encounters, or is it a certain amount of time?
look at all this. This is the buttons that I'm pressing on the
Oh
back
gosh.
end.
I didn't expect it to look so good. I thought it would look like an Excel
I know.
spreadsheet.
I treated myself. I was like, even
Yeah.
though I'm the only one seeing this, I'm going to make it look nice. Yeah, look, you're at the top.
Nice. As it should be.
You're even ahead of Test.
Blatant favoritism, obviously. You're so charmed by the artwork.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, go ahead.
I can't be defeated by the creatures that I created.
You had,
Except for that,
yeah,
apart from the sound.
you had an advantage in that you were able to study the creatures and find their weaknesses.
Obviously.
Good.
Yeah, well, thanks very
All
much
right.
for the opportunity. I'm glad that so many people have been able to see my my
Ah,
creation. It's an honor.